Like I haven't seen you.
All right, we are live at 5:04 p.m. I'm going to call the August 2nd Quality of Life meeting to order. If I could please get a roll call.
Counselor Chavez,
Here.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Here.
Counselor Michael Garcia, Counselor Villarreal,
Present.
Madam Chair,
I am here.
you have a quorum, Madam.
Thank you so much. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes? Staff or the committee? And if not, can I get a motion?
Move to approve the agenda.
Motion and a second to one of the Counselor Garcias. Take your pick. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to approval of consent. Loretta, what was pulled tonight?
Madam Chair, item I was pulled by Counselor Cassett. Item J was pulled by Counselor Cassett. Item K was pulled by Counselor Cassett. Item L was pulled by Counselor Cassett and Villarreal. And item M was pulled by Counselor Cassett.
Thank you so much. I apologize, everyone. I do have chocolate in my desk to make up for that. Any other changes? Anything else that needs to be pulled? Yes.
Item H, please.
H. And are you going to need staff?
No.
Okay. Anything else? And if not, can I get a motion to approve as amended?
So moved. Amended.
Second. Motion and a second. Can I please have a roll call?
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal. Yes. Chair Cassett.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on to presentations. We have an update on the El Lucero Crossing Economic Feasibility Study and Planning Efforts. We have Noah Burke here from Wilson and Company Planning Manager there, not here anymore. And then we have Terry Lease, our Asset Development Manager as well. So Mr. Burke, I will pass it along to you.
Thank you. Making sure it's working. No, the last time they had this little one that came out. Now it's just this bigger microphone. Good evening, counselors, Madam Chair. I think we're just making sure that the technology works.
And Noah, I will ask you to really make sure that you're speaking into the mic or else they won't be able to hear on YouTube.
Okay,
Thank you.
is better?
Yes.
Thank you. So thanks for having me again tonight. We'll be talking about a progress update on the El Lucero Crossing project, both the feasibility study and also the entitlements portion. I'll just keep rolling. So a little background and project history. In case you weren't familiar, there is the El Lucero Crossing is a 30.55 acre parcel of land that's owned by the New Mexico State Land Office and is leased to the city of Santa Fe for the purposes of economic development and a fire station. And we've been in a 25-year lease that was signed back in 2015. The lease was most recently amended in 2020 to approve a drainage easement that's on the southern portion of the property that was for approximately 1.09 acres. The fire station that we're talking about was a fire station that was required as part of the annexation agreement from 2009 that was approved by the Planning Commission, a development plan back in March 2020. And that's on 3.5 acres. And that's on the northern portion of adjacent to South Meadows. And that cost the city spent on that about $200,000 in development plan application costs for the design. And now comes Wilson and Company. In 2022, Wilson and Company was hired by the Office of Economic Development to undertake a feasibility study where we would look at this parcel to see the economic feasibility of it. And that was a cost of around $250,000 by the city in investment. And then back in 2023, the city entered into another agreement with Wilson and Company to do entitlement work, the general plan amendment and the rezoning requests for up to $50,000. So a little background about what El Lucero looks like from a zoning perspective. Well, right now, El Lucero is currently zoned R3, and that means up to 3 dwelling units per acre. It's a single family designation, and it's not conducive of economic development, which is required in the lease agreement that the city entered into with the state. And the future land use map actually has 3 low density residential classifications on the property. One's along the corridor, and then the 2 other are kind of, as you can see there, the orange where the fire station is, the yellow south of that. So right now, the city has or we're pursuing a rezoning general plan amendment, and it's underway. It is seeking to amend the general plan and the future land use map to community commercial from the low density residential designations that are there now, and which would enable from a rezoning perspective from an R3 to C2, which is a general commercial, which would allow uses more in line with economic development and also housing. Through this process, there's been a robust public engagement and including bilingual meetings and surveys that we'll talk about in a little bit. So for the economic feasibility study, the project development phases look something like this. The first part of the feasibility study was a site investigation where we looked at the 30-acre site for drainage, for boundaries, for easements, for utility connections and whatnot, and boundary surveys. We then entered into focus group meetings and interviews with different stakeholders, as well as different organizations that represent the South Side, and also organizations that represent the Spanish-speaking community as well. That then helped us to come up with a site plan, which we'll take a look at, a conceptual site plan, very high level. And then, we then took that back out to the public to get some feedback on that. And then also part of the feasibility study is an economic impact study and market gap analysis that is being done through NMSU's Arrowhead Center. And they have been undertaking that, and they completed that portion of the economic feasibility study back in April. Also part of the feasibility study is a high-level infrastructure plan where possibility of transportation and wet and dry utilities, water, wastewater, as well as your transportation networks throughout the site could connect so that it would help inform recommendations and also financial obligations potentially for the city into the future. And then the final stage will be which will come again before here, will be the final economic development feasibility study, where it brings all these pieces together in one document. So the conceptual site plan looks like this, and this is what has been laid out in 4 phases over the next 5 years. As you can see from this, you can see that there's different tracks, and with each track, there's different uses and square footage is stipulated, and also the timing of that. So as you can see in the first phase, the fire station would be part of the first phase, and that would be approximately 13,000 square feet, as was approved in the development plan. And then in the first phase also would consist of track G, which is at the lower part. And why that's important is because that's your drainage. And that's going to be drainage for most of the site conceptually right now. This could change through the development review process. But that would also double down as a playing field too. So it would be a centralized drainage and then also be multi-purpose for fields. And then the main component is the spine infrastructure in phase 1. That's your roads, your water, your wastewater, your gas and electric connections as well throughout the site. Phase 2 would be for light manufacturing and office and industrial park uses. And then phase 3, which is exciting, would be for potentially affordable and workforce housing on approximately 5.4 acres, which at this high level could house approximately 160 units. on tracks F and E as labeled here. And then the final phase would be a retail commercial component in phase 4 on track C, as you can see in the green there, which would be approximately cumulative 45,000 square feet between the different structures. And again, I want to emphasize that this is a conceptual site plan. This would actually work, but there is more detailed engineering that would need to go into the next future phases of this project. So the economic impact report that was done by NMSU came out with a bunch of different data, and I wanted to just highlight some of the economic impacts potentially of El Lucero as it's being presented and studied today. It would have an impact of 1,035 direct jobs, 256 million in economic output, 106 million in value added production, 72 million in labor income, 18 million in taxes generated, 12 million in federal taxes, and 6 million in New Mexico taxes. So we talked about the 5-year phasing plan, and one of the things that we wanted to take a closer look at is what does this look like from a development schedule? As you can see, the development plan and the entitlements would be in the near future. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The construction drawings would also go hand in hand with that, and the civil and landscaping kind of go throughout the life of the project, because that continues on as you're working, because you have your infrastructure for the first phase, and then it continues on through the different phases for the different uses. And then we've talked about what the different tracks would house, and then substantially complete by Q4 of 2020. So I want to talk a little bit about the entitlement process. We talked about how this is going to be a general plan and a rezoning request. And that was submitted, the application was submitted to the Land Use Department on May 15th. It was heard by the Planning Commission on July 6th, and the commission unanimously recommended approval to the governing body. And so on all the requests, the general plan amendments, which there was 3 of, and the rezoning request, which there's 1 of. And the hope is that it would be presented to the full governing body on September 13th. We talked a little bit about the robust public engagement and kind of, we went above and beyond. There was a robust, meaning that it went above and beyond what is required just by the land use code, the early neighborhood notification meetings, whatnot. We really understand that public participation is key to this project, and key to pretty much any type of effort that's going through. And so we kind of looked at this and said, what can we do that would be above and beyond the normal ENN process that still gets a lot of criticism? So what we went ahead and did is we first off, we looked at doing a virtual public survey, which was bilingual. That was available in English and Spanish. And that was online from April 6th to May 7th. And the goal of that was to collect community input about the desired uses, what uses are actually needed there, but also to inform the community about what's going on. And we created, you can see this little mailer that went out. And it also, in addition to being going virtual, it was also, we posted that on Nextdoor. And we reached about 600 different email addresses in the vicinity of this. And then we did a mailing to residents within 600 feet. And I think there was over 500 address points in that mailing that we sent out this pamphlet to, which also had a QR code so that they could take the survey. In addition to that, we hosted 3 focus groups on April 19th was the first one, and 2 on April 20th. And we met with nonprofit organizations that are prominent on the South Side, as well as neighborhood organizations that are on the South Side Advocates. We tried to meet with some representatives from them, Earth Care, Chainbreaker, and La Familia were some of the different nonprofits that we met with and engaged with. And we informed them, got their feedback, and we also asked for them to help us get the word out about the survey. And we were then able to distribute more flyers to them as well as provide them with a link to the surveys that they could send out to their listservs for their organizations. And then, of course, there was the early neighborhood notification meeting that happened on April 25th. So where are we now and where are we going? We're in the final stages with both the feasibility study and the rezoning and general plan amendment. The reason that we put some of these figures in terms of kind of costs associated with each of these tasks is because it is showing the investment that the city is making, or the Office of Economic Development, in this property, and how valuable that this is of an opportunity for the city as in coordination with the state land department. They are meeting, since we have been meeting with the state land office. They have been excited about this property and the potential for it, as well as they have also indicated that they, would like to be, in line with what the city's vision is based on the lease agreement. So the feasibility study we talked about was a $250,000 investment and up to $50,000 for the general zoning request. And we're also working on a marketing brochure with the Office of Economic Development so that we can help attract a developer to the site once all the entitlements have been completed, as well as the development plan, and also potential tenants. And then beginning in the fall 2023, we're looking to potentially do a master development plan, which would include engineering, very detailed engineering drawings, and yet another more robust public engagement and public meetings, because this is really talking about the impactful stuff after the zoning is what's going to be built there, where is it going to go, and what types of what's the look going to be, and the like. So and then hopefully for a city approval will also happen in the fall. We look for, it won't happen in the fall because we're looking at a 6 to 12 month process. And that's roughly estimated to be about $700,000 investment for all the engineering drawings and entitlements that go with the development plan. And then the spine infrastructure also starting on that for a cost of around $8 million. Some of the future steps are the fire station. That looks to be anywhere between the next 2 to 4 years. Potentially is when that could be underway. It could be sooner. Really depends on funding. And that's a $6 million investment that would be made by the city. And then also the funding mechanism, the capital outlay request that would be submitted for requesting a $50 million. Director Brown's on here and he can speak more to that as well. And then with that, that is the end of my presentation. So, and for any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Burke. Excuse me. I will say Mr. Burke's a little short on time today, so definitely ask your questions, but if we could be succinct, that would be, I think, helpful for him. Councilor Chavez.
Thank you, Chair Cassett, and I'm sorry about my voice. I'll try to be as clear as possible. With the family or the community engagement, I see that you showed how you reached out to the community and, all of that. Could you give us any, is there anything that could be shared with us about response? Like, what was the feedback from the community partners? What was the feedback from the community? I think that area is just such a priority in regards to serving the community in an equitable way. We have the Main Street project happening on Airport Road. There's been a lot of engagement and work. They envision a very specific thing on how to serve the South Side. So I feel like that feedback and that involvement is very important, and not just making an attempt to reach out, but kind of, us understanding what the feedback has been so far is important. Do you have any of that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and Councilor Chavez. So I do, and it's from a different presentation. It was the presentation that was given to the Planning Commission. So I put the slide up now. I don't know if you're able to see it on your side. But essentially.
Sorry, one second. Can you see it now, Councilor?
Yeah, thank you.
So, and remember, this is kind of this is always a struggle to engage on the south side, and to gauge people from all walks. It has been always, so we did the best we thought we could do. So like we talked about, there was the virtual public survey that we ran from May 6th, or from April 6th to May 7th. And I shared what that looked like. The survey received 24 responses, 17 in English and 8 in Spanish. And this, mind you, this was after we had met with the nonprofits that helped represent Miguel Acosta, helped get the word out to his community. We had some meetings with that. And to his constituents, as well as La Familia. We went and hand delivered about 100 surveys to La Familia, which included that they could hand out to different folks who came into them. And so, like I said, 17 responses were in English and 8 in Spanish. And then that also included the 600 feet where we hit 597 addresses to inform the residents and also to ask them to take the survey. So the next slide is talking about what those kind of highlights from the survey. And so, one of the things we were very curious about when we were formulating these questions is kind of what is the greatest need for the Southwest area in this area of town? And overwhelmingly, 21 of the responses that we got were parks, open space, and recreational facilities. And that does make a lot of sense, right? Because out there, it's spread out and there's not enough parks. And so, we got that, as well as need for a grocery store. It's a food desert out on that side of town. There is not a lot of opportunity to get healthy food, or any food for that matter, other than your Walgreens or your CVS or your El Pasanos, your closest market on Airport Road. And then additional jobs. People did indicate, and through our conversations in the focus groups, that there is a lack of opportunity for working on that side of town, and that the types of uses over here, employers that would have jobs would be very much accepted and wanted on this side of town. And then, of course, there's always the housing component. We need more housing, and we need more affordable and workforce housing. And that was what these survey results said for that question. And then what are the greatest economic development needs? Because we do have to remember that the El Lucero parcel is leased to the city of Santa Fe with the intent for economic development, and also and housing potentially. And so we did ask that question, and the large response was small business development and business incubation on this side of town. And then close to that was job creation, just flat out needing jobs, more jobs. And so that was the greatest economic need, according to the people who took the surveys and the input that we got.
Just real fast, were the schools engaged? That's our highest population of youth is on the south side. Was there, did anyone speak to like Superintendent Chavez, or see how to make connections with community members through the school? I always say this when there's anything going on the south side, because in regards to connecting to community members, what we're rich in on the south side is public schools. And they have very trusting relationships with, or community members have trusting relationships with the schools. They've developed relationships. They feel like, they could have hard conversations and share concerns. Were the public schools engaged at all in that process?
So thank you, Counselor, for that question. And it's a great question. So we did the best effort we could to reach out to the schools. They were notified of the focus groups and their participation, as well as mailed surveys and also mailed notified through the ENN process as well. So, and we didn't receive any response from the schools, unfortunately. We would have loved to engage with them, and maybe in the future, there is more of an effort to engage with the school district on this because maybe even more impactful stuff will come through the development plan process. Kind of where do these potential uses fit, and how much of what goes where, et cetera, and what opportunities are for their more recreational, like we showed in our site plan, there's an opportunity to create an open space, some playing fields for children. Even though El Camino Real Academy is right there as well and has some sports fields as well.
And I would hope for, the meaningful planning that there is this engagement. The Southside community is very special to me. That's where I served as principal. And that community deserves like that. Mailing things out, emailing things out, texting things out. I know that's like a lot of how we function right now, but there is this culture in the South Side that is really driven by human connection. They're driven by relationships. They have this very high emphasis on like community gathering. And so that, that really intentional reaching out and opportunity for them to have voice is really important. I would hope for like that, more impactful planning in the future that you're referencing, that there would be that kind of engagement involved. I feel that opportunity is often not given to our Southside community as we build. And, they've been very vocal about how they feel about that. And so going above and beyond, even though it may not be a requirement, is something that side of town deserves. So I would hope to see that in the future. And I already took a lot of time. So thank you. Thank you, Chair Cassett.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions, comments from members of the committee? Councilwoman Villarreal. Oh, tap me. You have to tap me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Burke. Did you say at the beginning what your role is in this? I felt like you didn't introduce yourself, but maybe I didn't hear it. Did you say?
Thank you, Councilwoman. So yeah, I'm Noah Burke and I'm the planning manager with Wilson and Company for New Mexico.
Okay. And because you all were the lead on most of these pieces, including community engagement, is that why your companies or you're presenting today?
That is correct, since
Okay.
we are involved with both the processes on El Lucero, right?
Got it. Okay. I just want to make sure everybody knows that because Noah used to work with us at the city. He's not back. Too bad, but it's not back. So I think this is interesting. I feel like there's so much that we not missed, but that was happening. It was during budget hearing. So maybe we didn't get all the details, but I'm really curious about the feasibility study and what that said. And it wasn't presented to us, I don't think, as a governing body or even in committee. And I'm wondering if it will be, if there's that's going to be shared with us so that we can see because that was ultimately the result, right, of what from the public outreach and other analyses that New Mexico State and you did. Is that how the feasibility study worked, or was that just New Mexico State, or was that Wilson? Can you clarify that for me?
Yes, Councilwoman Villarreal. So New Mexico, so there's the economic feasibility study that Wilson is engaged in. My colleague Charla Glendenning, who's also another planning manager, is the project manager for that. I'm presenting on behalf of her as well. That economic feasibility study had a subcontract through it to do a market impact analysis and a gap analysis, or a market impact study and a gap analysis component that New Mexico State through the Arrowhead Center has undertaken, and they completed their contract with us back in April. That will be put into the overall economic feasibility study, which will include conceptual site plans, background information, demographics, land uses. It's very large, and it has not been presented as a whole yet. It's in its final stages. In fact, it is literally being kind of edited right now as we speak. So the goal is to have that in front of the various boards and committees in addition to the council within the next month.
Okay, so that feasibility study will also include the entitlement process and approval as well, or is that separate?
That is separate. And the reason for that is because the economic feasibility study is basically seeking to identify, is it economically feasible to develop this site and what type of development
Got it. Okay.
potentially go there.
Got it. Thank you. And then you were talking about the different phases is that phases as in timeframes, like the playing field and fire station will be the first phase and the roads and infrastructure will be the first piece to get built or find funding for, and then the other ones will come in line after that, or is it are they kind of stacked, like, maybe happening simultaneously with the other phases?
Yeah, so Councilwoman Viral, basically, this is a conceptual phasing plan too. So but regardless of that, what really does have to go first is the infrastructure and the roads. So we know that that's going to be one of the first thing that has to go in, because that will be the key to the success of any other development on the site, spine infrastructure per se. So that would be what goes in first. These other uses are kind of prioritized per se, based on need. The fire station is a priority. It's stipulated in the lease agreement as well, with the state, and then potentially the drainage, and the playing fields, and then the different phases. I think this would get more fine-tuned through the development plan process, as this is conceptual. So this would be something that would be that you would see in the economic feasibility study.
Okay. Great. And then I guess I'm curious about, you were talking about the drainage area, which will then serve as a playing field. Is that typical that we have drainage areas become parks?
It's a great question. So it is a type of, it's not typical in Santa Fe necessarily, but in places like Albuquerque, you do see a lot of the sports fields that are actually in drainage basins, especially for some of the larger subdivisions that have gone in there. I think given Santa Fe's terrain, some of the sites that have been developed has tried to disperse centralized ponding, to more sustainable kind of practices for water harvesting. But again, it is a use that's wanted to be seen out there. So we would see this as, you could have it as playing fields when it.
And it works, you see it work in
Yes.
Albuquerque? Okay. I think the other thing was just, I'm also curious about what Councilwoman Chavez was concerned about, how community feedback is approached and then how it's actually incorporated and put into, the actual concept that it's recognized as something valuable. And so I guess I'm just curious how maybe you all are going to approach it differently in the next phases. I mean, right now you have some conceptual ideas, I think, based on community input. But how would that then play out in the next, I don't know if it's phases or the next few months, maybe? What's the plan for the kind of next phase of community engagement?
Thank you, Councilwoman. I think the next phase would have to be decided upon with the Office of Economic Development, because the way that we presented this, all the information through the engagement process, there was an engagement process that happened with the entitlements, which we felt was a lot more than is normally done for these types of requests. And then there's the engagement portion that was done through the economic feasibility study, which focused in on potentially different organizations, and both are being presented in summarizing a lot of the data that's collected to help make recommendations potentially. So I think that we would build off of what has already been done and then continue to improve upon that. Start earlier. I think that would be a lesson learned, is start earlier, start outreaching a lot earlier. Because I think that if you do take that, you have a greater chance. And then, as Councilor Chavez said, also engaging the public schools.
Yeah.
We did the best we could to outreach to them. But I think to her point, we could do more, we could do better, and kind of get that engagement, maybe even working with the school board members to help engage the principals or those communities, and maybe even having open houses. I think that was something that we thought we would do, but virtual seemed to be the way that made the most sense within the constraints of our contractual obligations.
Well, I think it's always good to piggyback on things that are already happening in the community, other, events, whether it's something at the school. I mean, the school district is a major stakeholder, and not just the school district as the entity, but the families that go to school at El Camino Real. And so I think that there's an important piece there that we need to make sure that we connect in a very intentional way. Instead of just surveys. I don't know, not many people really fill out surveys anymore. I hope that there's a way that we can engage people, like Councilwoman Chavez said, about, just in person and building relationships, because ultimately it should benefit what happens there, that benefit folks that live and work and play in that area as well. So I think that's all I had. I think so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Burke, for the presentation. Good to see you at the podium there again. I just a few points of not really questioning, but this is obviously an area that is to be developed even further. When the school came in, I think my first years on the planning commission came the first apartment complex that came, and then a second, and then a housing development. And then coming around that corner where the roundabout is, you see this piece of property that's, prime for development, and something that could be a very good, a wonderful contributor to that community. Some of the major concerns are how much traffic can that South Meadows corridor continue to sustain, especially with the development that's happening out there. But yet you have quite a bit of access to 599, which gets you just about anywhere. You just go down to Agua Fria, which will be developed and there. And so I think one of the big takeaways from this, and I know it's still, I do want to say that I have heard quite a bit of outreach, even through Liz Camacho and the Office of Economic Development. And I'm sure you're working closely with them to do this outreach. A lot of times I think that in this area, especially in my district, District 3, a lot of people don't, they see it and maybe they're busy, they don't come out and participate in that. And I think that's one of the hardest parts. And I think getting creative with the piggybacking with public schools and some of the other organizations for sure. As far as the fire station and the layout of what's at least as a conceptual plan here, I think it brings quite a bit to that area in regards to the fire station number 1, which we need. It'll offer a lot of relief to the rest of the city, and explain that we really do need that fire station for to be able to give the level of service that we do need to the whole city as it has grown. But you're also looking at opportunities for light manufacturing, small industrial spaces for people to rent, and which is economic development. And so I just taking a look at that conceptual plan, I think that it's a good spot for this, and a multifaceted use facility. So basically comments, not many questions. And yet again, it is an area that is growing and has a further potential for growth, and a contributor to our city. So mainly just comments. Thank you for the presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Burke. Really great to have you back at the podium again, and we'll see you in about a month. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, second presentation, we have an update on the Lamplighter Inn Motel conversion project. Jeff Curry, our Director of Development, or the Director of Development for JL Gray Company, and Cody Minnick, our project manager for the Office of Affordable Housing, are here to present.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Today I have the pleasure of co-presenting alongside Jeff Curry, the Director of Development of JL Gray. And we will be giving you an update on the Lamplighter Inn Motel Conversion Project. First, I will give a brief overview of the partnerships involved and the project and explain the city's involvement specifically in terms of funding. And then Jeff will get into specifics about the roles the different partners play, the project's other funding sources, and the progress made to date. And finally, the next steps and what we can expect is in terms of a development schedule. And afterwards, we'll stand for questions. The Lamplighter team is composed of a diverse group of stakeholders. At the forefront, we have JL Gray, who is the general partner, developer, and property manager. They've been at the key driver in this process, and they've been assisting with pre-development feasibility analysis. We have Incorum St. Vincent and Thornburg Foundation, who have both provided funding for collaborative strategy and technical assistance support, pre-development, and site acquisition. They've also provided capital for operations and services. We have the LifeLink, who is the lead service provider for the property. They are a Medicaid billing behavioral health agency, and they have, throughout the development process, they provided feedback on site design and helped develop the referral process. They will be the local lead agency providing services on the site. New Mexico Coalition to End Homelessness has provided initial assistance with consultant support. They helped hire Marisol Atkins of Luz del Sol and Jen Lopez from Project Maxi. Marisol and Jen have been really integral to this process, especially in terms of the community engagement piece. And finally, we have the government partners, the Department of Finance Administration, Santa Fe County, and us here at the City of Santa Fe, all of which have provided funding and project oversight. A brief overview of the project. The Lamplighter Inn Motel will be converted from a 78-room hotel into 58 units of affordable housing reserved for households earning no more than 80% area median income. 25% of the units are going to be set aside for households with special needs, which will primarily be folks transitioning out of homelessness and be receiving services and case management support from LifeLink. As I mentioned in the last slides, it's been a collaborative effort with multiple partners. There's a lot of stakeholders who are invested in this project and want to see it succeed. We decided to include an AMI table on here so you can get a sense of the income limits. At the bottom there, you can see the 80% income limit. So a family of four, household of four can earn no more than $68,250 to be eligible to live at the Lamplighter. A single family household can earn no more than $47,800, and that's at the very high end of the threshold. I'll pass it over to Jeff, who will dig a little deeper on the partners' roles.
Thanks, Cody. Thank you, Chair Cassett and members of the committee. Cody, do you mind if we go back one slide for just a second? I just wanted to point out that even though we have elected to serve households that make no more than 80% of the median income, rents should be within easy reach of households that make 60% of the area median income. And so that is incomes between $40,000 and $50,000 a year. Rents were originally underwritten to be around $825 to $925 for studios and one bedrooms. We can go to the next slide. I wanted to take the opportunity to get a little more clear on the current structure of the project for the committee. JL Gray is the general partner, but we own a 0.01% interest in the Bella Luz Apartments 2022 company. Incorum St. Vincent is our limited partner and has been the catalyst for this project financially. And they are a limited partner at 99.99% of ownership. JL Gray will run the property day to day and will make decisions regarding all of our operations. And our goal is that before the compliance period ends, we can turn the project over to a nonprofit. And the LifeLink was actually our first choice. We hope to make that work. In terms of partners, the LifeLink is, as Cody pointed out, our primary service provider. The huge benefit here is that they are already right next door to the project. at the La Luz facility. And JL Gray has been working with them for over 20 years. We manage the facility for them, and we work hand in hand providing housing for people with acute cases of homelessness and mental health needs. We also just wanted to express our gratitude to our other partners. The city of Santa Fe was one of the first to step up with the large funding sources that we have, and we're truly appreciative of that. We can go to the next slide. Cody, did you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'll handle this one.
Thanks.
As the members of the committee know, the governing body has approved 4 different contracts for this project, totaling $3,939,564. The first of those contracts is through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in the amount of $800,000. This is being used for soft costs such as developer fees, architectural and design fees, feasibility studies, as well as land and real estate costs. This was funded through a competitive request for application process, wherein Bella Luz applied for, our office issued a request for application for Affordable Housing Trust Funds. They responded to that by submitting an application, presented their application to the Community Development Commission, and the CDC recommended them for funding. The next contract is a Community Development Block Grant Subrecipient Agreement in the tune of $295,094. CDBG was used for asbestos remediation. This has been completed and the funds have been expended. This was also funded through a competitive RFA process. The next contract is an American Rescue Plan Act project participation agreement, where the city allocated $2 million for the acquisition of the property. This has also been complete. That was funded through a budgetary appropriation. And finally, state capital outlay funds in the amount of $844,470, which will be used for construction and rehabilitation, as well as capital improvements. This was funded through a capital outlay appropriation in 2019, and then awarded through a competitive RFA for fiscal year 20. You want to say anything else about that, Jeff, or should I?
No, that's perfect. Thank you. So looking at the additional sources of funds, I just wanted to mention that Acorn St. Vincent, as a partner in the project, made a capital contribution of $3.5 million once we knew that there were enough awards in place and we were waiting for all of the agreements to be signed. They went ahead and helped secure the site and started the process of doing all of the studies and hiring the architects, et cetera, to make this move forward as quickly as they could. The very first set of funds that came in was from the New Mexico Department of Finance and Administration. That was $4.2 million of CDBG coronavirus money. And that was being administered, that is going to be administered through the New Mexico Mortgage Finance Authority. Santa Fe County also provided ARPA money in the amount of $1.5 million, which is going to go towards the purchase of the property. And we expect to have a gap in financing. Everything up to this point has been covered by grants, but we expect to have approximately $600,000 in gap that will be an interest-only loan until we can fill it with other sources, and that's going to be from Acorn St. Vincent as well. We go on to progress. To date, the following progress has been made. We acquired the building in May of 2022. Asbestos and lead remediation was started in December of 2022 and completed in February of 23. This year has been focused on site design and getting through the administrative approval process. We've been through 3 rounds so far and should be ready to finalize construction drawings with a final approval from the city. Construction drawings are near completion. Let's go to the development schedule. This is what we're looking for in the future. The project, as I just said, is currently in the project design and administrative approval phase. We'd hope to finish by February of this year. Obviously, we are past our desired time frame. However, our engineering and construction documentation has continued in the background, And we are getting ready for a bid process as soon as we get city approval. Once we go out to bid, if we receive acceptable responses from contractors, we can move forward with a final underwriting from the New Mexico Mortgage Finance Authority. And then we will go out for permits and hopefully start construction this fall. We hope to start delivering units in phases as early as this winter if things go as planned. And finally, we would like to stand for any questions that you have. We really appreciate all the help that the city has afforded us, and we're truly grateful.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Really, really appreciate your work on this project. And we know it's one of these big key issues that as we find these ways to continue to address our challenges. So thank you so much for all of your work. Really do appreciate it. Questions or comments from members of the committee? Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Curry and Cody Minnick for being here and giving us some details. I think what I hear from constituents is just a couple of questions, since I think there's some information on a website that they can access so they can see what's happening and the timeline, the desired timeline. I know there was a delay and folks didn't really know why. Can you speak a little bit about the delay and what occurred, and then also how community members can access information about this project moving forward?
Absolutely. Chair Cassett and committee members, thank you so much. We do have information up on the S3 Housing Initiative website where we do provide updates to the project's process. There is a form that anyone can fill out to ask questions, and we have Marisol Atkins responding to those as quickly as possible. We also are attending Casa Alegre neighborhood meetings when possible. We were invited to present and we hope to present at future meetings as well. And so that's the easiest way to learn about the project. It has been surprisingly difficult to get through the design process and the administrative approval process. We have been running into significant issues finding engineers that understand the transformation of an old 1960s hotel, dealing with the conversion, not only with energy efficiency, making tiny units energy efficient and meeting the guidelines of the city, but also how we can meet the city's requirements for open space and parking and accessibility with a limited amount of funding. So we've been going through lots of design iterations and a lot of back and forth with the cities, trying to get to a project that is both feasible and desirable, and hopefully a big boost to the community in that neighborhood.
Thank you for those details. I think that will be helpful just to know that there's a lot of steps to get to where you're at now. Wasn't there also some delays with, well, maybe it's this design and administrative process, but in effect, it actually increased the cost of the development because due to material costs, et cetera?
We've gone through a few underwriting iterations, and costs have definitely continued to rise even after the pandemic. The biggest expenses that we've seen are with the cost of electrical components, HVAC units. We have to install all new transformers, main distribution panels, and circuitry throughout the property. That has caused us to go back out and ask for additional funding. Not only that, a lot of this coronavirus funding that we received took a very long time to understand how we could accept it, how it could be brought into the project. without breaking any financial rules. And so there were some stumbles there as we tried to align the money to the appropriate uses.
That makes sense. I mean, I don't think most people would know that, but the bureaucratic wheels definitely don't make it easy to make projects viable. And then I guess my last question is just like, what is your plan for if there's any required public engagement moving forward, or any, just desired public engagement just for information purposes? What does that look like?
There is no required public engagement. We are not changing zoning or asking for variances on the site. However, we are very willing and happy to attend neighborhood meetings. We do want to, once we have a design approved by the city, we want to be able to share that with the neighborhood. We have already taken advice about lighting and other requests. Parking was a big issue in the neighborhood, and we've tried to accommodate parking issues on Deck Lavina and Luana streets by allowing people to park at our site. So we are open to anything that the neighborhood would like. We're very willing.
Great. That's great to know. I think folks would like to know probably the design. I would personally too, just to see what you all come up with from a different use building that's older. So yeah, that would be great to know.
We'll try to share better photos on site. We have a couple renderings on the website that show what we do to try to make it slightly more residential looking. We've removed some of the doors and windows, and those pictures are on the S3 website. But that's a great advice, and we'll try to do better in that area.
Yeah, I think just an info session that's obviously, we know it's not required, but just for the public to know this is, what's moving forward and what to expect. I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your work, and no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman. Excuse me. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Doesn't look like it. Well, thank you both so much for being here, and thank you for your work. Really, really excited to see this moving forward.
Thank you so much.
All right, moving on to the consent item. First is item H. It's consideration of a resolution 2023 to be numbered later, sponsored by myself and Councilwoman Villarreal. It's a resolution proposing a ballot question to be submitted to the City of Santa Fe's voters during the November 7th, 2023 regular local election regarding approval of the city ordinance establishing a high-end excise tax for affordable housing. Attorney McSherry is listed as the staff. Oh, but you did not need staff. So over to you, Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just pulled it. I had originally I've been thinking about the resolution, all the details involved with it, and basically pulled it because I will be voting against it, even that this goes to the voter. But I believe that taxes, especially taxes on top of taxes and top of taxes, I don't necessarily know that they work for us. And so the only reason I pulled it was to vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other questions or comments from the committee? If not, can I please have a motion?
Move to approve.
We have a motion and a second. May I please get a roll call?
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
No.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Cassett,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you so much. Okay, moving on to item I. This is consideration of a resolution 2023 to be numbered later, sponsored by Councilors Chris Rivera, Michael Garcia, Lee Garcia, and Councilwoman Renee Villarreal. It is a resolution proposing a ballot question to be submitted to the City of Santa Fe's voters during the November 7th, 2023 regular local election regarding amending the city's charter to include a provision establishing an independent office of the Inspector General for the City of Santa Fe, Marcy is the staff here, if she's still here. Although I don't really have any questions. We did have a very robust conversation about this at finance. And there'll be a similar theme for all of these that I pulled. We'd really discussed at finance, my concern that not necessarily that this is not something to explore, but that we have not done the exploration yet and the research at this time that I would feel comfortable placing it on the ballot. As we still do not have a design to understand what this office would look like, really analyzed our current system for reporting fraud, waste, and abuse and addressing fraud, waste, and abuse, and whether or not that system is working. If there are problems in the system, how would we address them? And so while I do think that there were a lot of, really important things that the Charter Review Commission brought forward that we should be exploring, they themselves did say that they did not have adequate time to really deep dive into these things. And so I would encourage members of the council to continue to work on these items, but I do not think that they are ballot ready at this time. I have no other questions or comments. Councilor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to bring it to the public's attention that a design is not required to bring a proposal to the ballot. This has been an issue in the past, and I think just want to make sure the public is well aware that this is well within our rights as a governing body to hear this matter. And if we want to push it off to the voters and the voters vote in favor of it, we have all abilities to design this office and conduct a thorough assessment and understand where the gaps are and how this office could benefit city government, and not only benefit, but make it stronger. These type of structures are implemented in various forms of government, as I mentioned on Monday, federal level, state level. Even our neighbors down south at the city of Albuquerque have a independent inspector general office. And so I think, the time is no better than now, and I'm not directly relating this proposal to our audit, but that's one function that this office can do is help with some of these findings, the 22 findings that we had with this recent audit. This inspector general office can help strengthen the oversight of our departments. And that way, when we conduct our audits, we have zero findings. We not only have a clean audit, but we have zero findings. And it's a tool to help us make our government more effective, more strong. And no time is better than now. A clear example is the unfortunate situation where there was a fraudulent payment of $35,000 made. And I can't say with a surety that wouldn't have been done, but the Inspector General's office could have been conducting oversight that could have recognized that those policies and procedures did make us vulnerable and could have prevented that. So I think this is an office where prevention is the focus, not reaction, and it only helps us to build a stronger government. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. And just in response, a couple things. One, the $35,000, if I recall correctly, our procedures were not followed. And that was part of it. It was not that our procedure was faulty, but the procedure was not followed. And as Director Oster, Finance Director Oster reported, we actually were able to recover the vast majority of that money. And while I do agree, we do absolutely have the right to see this and we do have the right to put it on the ballot. My concern is that somebody may vote for this thinking it's one thing, and then it turns out to not be that. And it might not be something they would have voted had they seen the details. I think that it is important that if we are going to put something to the voters, that we are able to tell them precisely what it would look like. If I had a constituent come up to me and ask me, well, how would this function? How would they be, put in place? Who would have oversight over them? I would not be able to answer those questions. And I do think that it is very important that we are clear with the voters of what we are asking them to approve or not approve. And I would also point out that this does not have to go to the voters. We could set up an Office of Inspector General without it going to the voters. If we choose to put it into the charter, that of course is a choice we can make, but it is not necessary to set up this office. But again, I do not feel comfortable asking the voters for a vote on something that does not yet have the details fleshed out, and think that it is important that we do our legwork we do our research and we look at what would potentially fit Santa Fe the best. And then at that point, if we choose or if we have to take it to the voters, that then there are the details so we can really tell them what it is that they are voting on. Also, in regards to the audit, I think this is really important. Office of Inspector General, we're talking about fraud, waste, and abuse. With our audit, our findings were not about fraud, waste, and abuse. They primarily had to do with lack of personnel and lack of procedure and some systems issues. And so I think that that is really important that the public know that we did not, get this report back that was saying that there was widespread fraud, waste, and abuse at the city. It primarily really had to do with the personnel shortages and how that slowed down our systems, as well as our technology that we had in place, as well as the procedures that occurred, during the COVID year for 21. It'll be interesting to see 22 and 23, but I think that that is really crucial for the public to know. Does not mean that an Office of Inspector General will not be involved in looking at our processes and procedures, but I just want to make sure that point is clear. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Councilor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just would like to correct for the record that I never stated that the audit had any fraud, waste, or abuse. But as somebody who's very well experienced with audits, findings such as we had in our audit can lead to fraud, waste, and abuse. And so I think the public needs to be given the public needs to be told what is real. I think the unfortunate thing is with our audit that we focus on words that might mean other things. For example, a clean audit, typically clean sounds good. Well, when you got 22 findings, that's not good. What that ultimately word clean means is that 1 + 1 = 2, and our auditors were able to verify that. So it's just saying with 100% accuracy, they're able to verify that there were at least 22 findings. That's what that means. And so I don't want to get into the details of the audit. That's not what this issue is about. But I just wanted to correct the record that I never stated that it's within our audit there was fraud, waste, and abuse. There are findings that could potentially lead to fraud, waste, and abuse. And that's what an audit is all about. An audit is about, I've said this in the past, it's like going to the doctor's office. You go to the doctor's office and get a checkup and they tell you your high blood pressure is this, take this medication. You're smoking, stop smoking because it can kill you. They tell you how to make sure you're living a healthy lifestyle. Same thing with an audit. They point out and say where there are deficiencies, where things can go wrong, and where things need to be fixed. And so that is where an Inspector General's office can really help boost us in that realm, because we definitely need all the help we can get. And not only now in this instance, but for the future. Because it helps us to build a strong, efficient, effective government where we know that we have an independent Inspector General's office that is not there to catch people. It's there to make government more efficient. And I think that is where it would really benefit the city to have this office. And again, the details aren't necessarily needed. The details are we would have an independent oversight of the city's functions, the taxpayers' resources, and those details that need to be hashed out can be done through ordinances, policies, rules, etc. And that's where, as we begin to work on development as such, we can really engage the community in regards to what that office looks like. This is more so the posing the question, do you think this is necessary for the city government? And I think overwhelming the constituents I've talked to are saying, yes, we need somebody providing independent oversight of our city resources. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. And I do want to correct that I did not say that you stated that there was fraud, waste, and abuse. I just wanted to make sure that the public was aware, since those two topics were happening in the same conversation. So I wanted to make sure they were not connected in that sense, that there was the findings of the audit. And I also do want to state for the record that I am not sitting here saying that 22 findings are just fine and that everything is fine and that we don't have a lot of work to do. These were just not, I just wanted to state that fraud, waste, and abuse were not the current findings, to make sure that those were clear. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Councilwoman Villarreal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wish my colleagues that weren't in finance could have heard the conversation. There was some questions about how effective the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline is currently, if staff even know about it, they know what the process is. We did get some information from our HR director, and I didn't actually know this, but they monitor the portal and then they review the course of action. And again, that's dealing with another entity of staff. And to me, that's not the appropriate pathway. I think because there may be some issues that happen in HR and folks wouldn't necessarily be comfortable with stating an issue or something that's happening that they think needs to be brought to light. And so the pathway just seems like maybe it doesn't make sense. I know there's an intake service company and platform, but I still think that there does need to be an independent role here. And that's how I see the Office of Inspector General playing in this perspective, although I think there's a lot of different roles they could play. So, and I do agree with my colleague about the prevention is the focus. It's not like gotcha moments. It's really trying to prevent things from, getting worse or not knowing what the issues are or systems or procedures that are not being followed, and then snowballing later on. So I guess I just see it as like proactively dealing with or looking at our systems and our structure and our city as a whole. And so I think having an independent entity makes the most sense. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Your Councilwoman, Councilor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, I was able to watch the finance meeting from Monday, and there was a lot of great points that were brought up. I feel that the reason why I do support this and I'm one of the sponsors is because I think there has to be a certain level of checks and balances in any government. And again, it's not as my colleague stated just recently, is that you're not trying to catch people, but you're trying to create a better workflow and more so help each department to be better. And I think that that's what this department would do. Ultimately, it would go to the voters, and it can be, if passed, the office can be created however we really feel it needs to be staffed and so on. And so I think there's no better time than now to get this passed and put in front of the voters. And that's why I support this. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? And I just want to clarify to make sure that I am clear that I am not saying that we do not need oversight or we do not need prevention. Of course, those things are extremely important. I am simply saying that I don't believe the homework has been done yet in order to take this to the voters, and that I would be more comfortable proposing to the voters something that is really fleshed out, so that there is a very clear understanding of what this process would look like. So just want to be clear for the public that I'm not saying that these things are not important. I just think that I would like a more solid proposal. And if that is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. May I please have a roll call?
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Cassett,
No.
motion passes.
Thank you so much. Moving on to item J. This is consideration of a resolution to 2023 to be numbered later, sponsored by Counselor Michael Garcia and Councilwoman Villarreal. It's a resolution proposing a ballot question to be submitted to the city's voters during the November 7th, 2023 regular election regarding amending the city's charter to reduce the signature requirements for referenda and initiatives from 33.3% to 15%. Provide that the denominator used to calculate the percentage is the total number of voters who voted in the most recent election that included the election of the office of the mayor, and make appropriate technical changes to sections 3.01, 3.02, and 3.03, consistent with ordinance number 2018-24 regarding the city's adoption of the Local Election Act. And again, we have Marcy here to present. I do actually have some questions on this one. Again, I thought this was a really interesting proposal that came out of the Charter Committee, and there's some things that I would like to know about it before moving forward. And maybe we do have those now. I am curious about what the shift would mean in the calculation for the actual number of signatures that would be needed. So instead of talking about just who voted in the mayoral race, but the total election, and how that changes. And I know it would vary. It would vary from election to election, but in general, I would be curious to hear how that shifts. Does that mean that there would be, fewer signatures needed overall? Or because we're expanding that voter base, does that not shift as much?
Thank you. Chair and counselors, the question would have us move the number of signatures from 15 to 33%. And I think one of the big pieces is that it asks us to
Opposite, we'd be moving from 33% to 15.
oh, thank you. And so I have to admit that math is not my strong suit. But yeah, so we'd be moving the percentage by that much. And my notes.
I guess the question there is really, in any given election, and of course, we'd have to average it out over the last few mayoral elections. How many more voters are voting in the election, but are not voting for the mayoral race? So it changes the percentage, but it also changes the population that we're taking a percentage from. And I'm just curious what that difference looks like.
Exactly. It changes the population from which we're drawing. And so we would it would be a bigger population because it would be in the election where everyone voted. Do you want to help that?
Counselors. I was on the Charter Commission. I'm Pat Begali, Assistant City Attorney. The idea was that if that is probably our largest local election, it is possible that someone just wanted to vote for their counselor and not for the mayor. And the commission didn't want to have a different count of who voted in the election because someone didn't vote for that office.
Correct. Yeah, I'm really curious so we haven't done the math. Okay.
I don't think we know.
We could probably pull it, maybe.
I suspect it's pretty small.
Okay, thank you. And then how often in general have referendums oh my gosh, I'm forgetting my other word. But how frequently have we had these come from petition to get onto the ballot?
That I actually really don't know.
Okay. Referendums and initiatives founded in the caption. Okay, so that would also be something I'd really be interested in. I'd also be curious if there's been attempts in the past, and if we know if the challenge had been that the numbers were too high, or just that there wasn't support. And so they weren't able to reach the numbers because it wasn't something that a third of the voting population had been interested in. And so what happens if there is a proposal that comes from the public that's not legal, and they get the correct number of signatures, they get enough, but it is not something that the city of Santa Fe can legally do? Either we are preempted by state or federal law, there's something else in our code that counters it, but there's a legality issue because that's something that we frequently talk about, our ability and our legal limits.
Counselors, whatever happens now.
Yeah, I don't know, I would
Um,
say the same, but I'm curious what it is.
Right, I suspect we would not be able to put something on the ballot that isn't legal, but I'm not sure what the process is.
Okay. And then I know that the Charter Review Commission, so Pat, you might be able to answer this, but they had done some look at some other municipalities. And can you give me some information about how that looks compared to New Mexico, compared to other cities that might be comparable cities in terms of Santa Fe, maybe out of the state, and what their percentages look like compared to ours?
Yeah, counselors, I'm not sure. I don't have the report in front of me.
Okay,
You? Yeah, I remember ours was way.
ours was way higher, yes.
Than
Mhm.
most. I think most were around 15%.
Okay,
Some were 10, and I think the commission decided to not go that low.
okay. And I'd also be really curious to see, maybe we don't have this information yet, that when there was a change, if other municipalities made a change, so they went from, a higher percentage needed to a lower, that if there was a change in behavior, if there was a change in the number of initiatives that went on the ballot, I'd be curious to know about that. Do we have any information on that?
I am not sure if any of that was in the commission report. I know there was a lot of information. Again, I don't think that very many municipalities had percentages as large as ours is currently at 30 or 33%. I'm not sure what kind of comparisons we could make.
Yeah. Do you happen to know what the state of California is for those voter initiatives?
Not offhand, but
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's under 20.
Yeah. Yeah, this has been, I've been, this one's interesting because on the surface, I think feel like this could be a good idea. Having voted in California though, it took me about a good year, 10 hours to research every single proposal that I was asked to vote on. And that made me, that's one of those things that I got a little nervous about. And of course that's statewide. So that's a really big difference because most people did not take 10 hours to research their entire ballot. One year it was like a good 2 days during finals. That's why I was just kind of curious about, again, what this has looked like in other communities. Obviously a lot of communities are doing this and so, and do have a lower percentage than we do. So I'm just very curious at what their experience has been. So I would like to get some more information if possible, as we move this through the committee processes, and I can absolutely reach out and send some questions in advance, as I know that sometimes is easier. I apologize. I did not have the opportunity to do that today. A little bit of a busy one. So, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? And if
To
not, is there a
approve.
motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Can I please get a roll call?
Counselor Chavis,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Cassett.
Yes, and I'll explain my vote. I'm leaning in a yes to this. Again, there are some questions that I have. I don't know if I'll stay a yes, but I'm happy to move this on to continue the conversation.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Oh, right. I forgot to let you do that before I explained. I apologize. Moving on to item K. This is consideration of a resolution 2023 to be numbered later, sponsored by Counselor Michael Garcia and Counselor Chris Rivera. It is a resolution proposing a ballot question to be submitted to the city's voters during the November 7th, 2023 regular local election regarding amending the city's charter to include a provision stating that the governing body, commissions, and boards must adopt procedural rules stating that they must adhere to established principles of procedural due process and fundamental fairness when functioning in a quasi-judicial role. Marcy is here, Marcy Anarino, correct? I've been forgetting to say your title, the Manager of Legislation and Policy Innovation, and then City Attorney, Assistant Attorney Pat Fagali is here as well. I also pulled this similar to the Office of Inspector General. I completely agree. Our land use processes need to be looked at. I think that we need to look at our ENNs. I think that we need to make sure that there is understanding. But at this point, I feel that this proposal at this time is just too nebulous. And I could see where there would be a lot of potential for people to vote for this, thinking that it means one thing or thinking that they're going to get one thing. And then in the end, that thing does not happen. Councilor Romero Worth and I have already started to look at some of the ENN processes and the land use processes. I think that this is an important issue for us to take up. And I do not think at this point it is ready for a ballot initiative, and nor does it have to go to the public for this one. So very similar to the one above. It's not that I don't think that these are valid ideas that need exploration. I just think that they need exploration and to really be fleshed out and to have the details there before I would feel comfortable voting for this to go onto the ballot. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? And if not, can I get a motion?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. May I please have a roll call?
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
I'd like to abstain for now. I need more information about how it would work, what it means.
Chair Cassett,
No.
motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to consideration of bill number 2023-20. It's adoption of an ordinance number, we already have that. Sponsored by Mayor Weber, Counselor Cassett, Counselor Romero Worth, and Counselor Michael Garcia. It is a bill relating to metropolitan redevelopment, deleting the content of section 7-2 regarding urban renewal, repealed by state law in 2008, and replacing it with the city's Metropolitan Redevelopment Code, section 6-13 and 6-14, amended to be consistent with state law, delete language specific to a business capital district, limit Metropolitan Redevelopment Commission leasing authority to that specified in a particular metropolitan development plan, and specify qualifications for Metropolitan Redevelopment Commissioners. Rich Brown, our Director of Community Development, is here to answer questions, and it looks like Assistant Attorney Pat Fagali is as well. I had pulled this, and Councilwoman Villarreal had pulled this, and I'm going to guess we pulled it for the same reason. And Councilwoman Villarreal, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, we were trying to come up with language that made sure there was a balance of expertise and experience on this important body. And it's not just an advisory body, it's a recommending body that will have very important role as we look at future community development. And so we were trying to work on language that captured those areas that were listed of potential experience and expertise, and then simultaneously also making sure that it was inclusive of potentially other areas of expertise. So if you look at the amendment, I was trying to find, we don't have a red line, do we?
We do if you refresh.
Okay. Okay, so if you please ignore Amendment A and B, because those were ideas that Councilor Romero Worth and I had proposed, and ultimately we came up with one together that combined our ideas and goals to make the adjustment. So let me just go to the first one. This was initially one of my first amendments, was to keep the language advice and consent when we're talking about the mayor with the advice and consent of the governing body, making these appointments. So that was one change. And then
Just for those who are following along, sorry, Councilwoman,
Yes.
that is on page 5, line 8 of the red line.
Thank you. And then if you scroll on to item, or sorry, page 6, line. Ultimately, the changes, minor changes start on 14, but if you look on line 15, we took out the original language and added the commission's membership should include persons with experience, expertise or experience, including but not limited to the following areas. And then this was the original language. It said commercial property development, affordable housing development, community planning, banking or financial services, or did we change that? Okay, or.
It says or in the version I have still.
Did we say and?
I think we wanted the or because
Okay.
the and made it too,
Got
like, yeah.
Okay.
We
sorry.
wanted the or.
I'm having flashbacks from our conversation. And then 5, we made a minor adjustment saying representing marginalized communities instead of communities in need. And then additional language we added were members shall be selected to reflect the diversity of the Santa Fe community and shall include a diversity of perspectives.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Nice work to you guys for moving through that. Counselor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think the intention around the amendment when we discussed this at the governing body was to ensure that we have folks from at least these 5 criteria. But the way the amendment is written is similar to its existing saying. It should include these folks, but it's not requiring any of these particular ones to be met. So it's still allowing for 5 folks to meet criteria number 1 or, criteria 1, 3, and 5 be met, but it's not requiring that we check the box on all 5. And I think that was the original intention around the amendment.
Madam Chair, just to clarify that was the original intention, but then we started thinking about other areas beyond the 5 that we would want to include community members, say, and maybe they have expertise in sustainability, say they have expertise in mediation or any other kind of community related area that's not listed. And that worried me. And I think others felt the same, like, well, what if we're pigeonholing ourselves just for these areas and we're not thinking broadly, because community development really can encompass a lot of different things. And so these aren't necessarily, I think these now have become suggestions of some of the areas we want to consider, but that's why we added members shall be selected to reflect the diversity of Santa Fe and shall include a diversity of perspectives. That may be general, but I also think it does reflect that we do want representation in our community that reflects our community.
And just to add to that, we are limited to only 5 members per the state law. So we weren't able to expand but we wanted to make sure that this was part of the conversation in finance. We wanted to make sure that as Councilman Villarreal said, that we didn't pigeonhole. What does become relevant there is that I think that where that advice and consent piece comes in, and then of course the consent of the governing body. So really putting it on the governing body to make sure that this is being met, that this is being followed. So it was a complex balance that we were trying to meet of being prescriptive but not restrictive. Any other questions or comments? Okay, can we get a main motion on the floor for this?
Move to approve.
Second.
We
Second,
have a main motion and a second, and then moving to the amendment. Can I get a motion on the amendment?
Move to approve.
Move to approve amendment.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to move amendment C or to approve amendment C. Any more questions or discussions from members of the committee? And if not, can I please have a roll call?
Madam Chair, this is a roll call on the motion.
This is a roll call
To
on the
move the
motion for the
amendment.
amendment.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you. Counselor Chavez,
yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Cassett,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you so much. And now on to the main motion. Any other questions or comments? Any more discussion on the main motion? And if not, can I please get a roll call?
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Cassett,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you so much. All right, on to the last one. Consideration of resolution 2023 to be numbered later. Sponsored by Counselor Michael Garcia and Councilman Renee Villarreal. It is a resolution proposing a ballot question to be submitted to the city's voters during the November 7th, 2023 regular local election regarding amending Article 10 of the city's charter to specify the Santa Fe Municipal Charter Commission's appointment terms and functions. And we have Marcy Iannarino. I'm going to get it and not trip on it one of these days. Our Manager of Legislation and Policy Innovation. Again, I think this one's really important. We saw very clearly that the Charter Commission did not have the time or potentially the resources to really do the work in a way that was that could have really, I think, brought forward, more specific recommendations. And so I would really like to see this worked on. I'd actually be very interested in working on this, but I do think that we need more details specifically about what this means. This one did have a bit more details, but there's also some things that I would like to think about. We had talked about the challenges around what happens if we're doing redistricting and the kind of the order of redistricting versus charter review coming in. And then that we should do charter review prior to redistricting. And then I'd be curious, what does this mean financially? What is enough resources to do the work? What do those resources go towards? Why is this funding needed to do this work, and how much funding, and what would that funding be utilized for? So again, I just really would feel more comfortable with a much more detailed proposal going to the voters before I would be ready to vote on this one. Thank you. Councilor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I got more of a comment than question, because the majority of these proposed ballot questions came directly from the Charter Review Commission. And nowhere in our guidance requirements given to them is that they were to put forth a fully detailed and implemented plan to meet the threshold to go on a ballot initiative. And I think, given the justification you've stated, nothing that the Charter Review Commission presented or recommended is going to meet that threshold. And I think that's very unfortunate, because those members weren't given the guidance that or the information to get the details that you're seeking. They were given the guidance to provide recommendations. And given the timeline and constraint that we were under, and for the public that is not aware of this process that we undertook, the Charter Review Commission met on the first half of the year. So they basically met from January and they delivered their report in May. And then the City Council considered their report during a special meeting in June. And I can speak from my only experience. I introduced these resolutions right after that meeting. So I think to get the details and data and research that is being requested this is a perfect example why this needs to be passed, because we need to set up a sufficient process and procedure to allow for the Charter Review Commission to do their work, but also meet the needs or potential needs of the governing body members. And I find it really unfortunate that the work that this Charter Review Commission did is not meeting the threshold to be a ballot question. And so I think Again, this is why I'm fully supportive of this. There's nothing that prohibits this from going to be a ballot initiative. We can reconvene the Charter Review Commission members after to get those details that have been requested, whether it's this one or we can conduct research as we've said in the other initiatives or the ballot questions, and we can conduct our business in that manner. There's nothing that prevents it. I think the public is well aware of the discussions we're having, and it's not like we are proposing one question and we're going to do completely opposite once it gets down to doing the meat and potatoes and the sausage making of the process of these ordinances, policies, rules, whatever needs to be changed. And with that being said, the public still would be engaged, especially if we need to introduce ordinances or amend ordinances. There are two opportunities for folks to provide public input. And I think a perfect example is with the proposed ordinance change on the excise tax. How if folks are in favor of something, they'll come out in favor of it. If folks are not in favor of something, they'll come out and speak out against it. So I think, let's honor the will of the Charter Review Commission and move forward with this ballot question. And then we can really determine what a proper process looks like that's going to allow for them to do their work in a sufficient time and engage the community in a manner that is going to really add value to this process. Because if we continue with the process that we just went through, we're never going to get the information needed to put forth appropriate ballot questions. We're setting folks up for failure. So with that, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Do you want to respond? I think what I am hearing that our disagreement is on the order. And I don't think that the Charter Review Commission needed to come out with fully fleshed ideas. I think that was our job, and I don't think that happened. And I believe that should happen before it goes on the ballot. So I think that is, kind of what I'm hearing is the key fundamental issue. I don't think it's actually disagreement about whether or not this needs to happen. I think this does need to happen. I think we do need to amend this process. I think we did see that there were some hiccups here that we need to address. I just believe that before we codify something in our charter, which is not as easily changed as an ordinance, we need to know exactly what it is. And I don't feel comfortable putting something to the voters that I cannot answer that question as to what it is. To bring up the excise tax, this doesn't say, should we have an excise tax in general? We'll let you know what it is later. Go ahead and vote on it. And then we definitely have to do it. It's very specific. It is this amount on, this sales price over. And so I do think that all of these things are important to look at. I think that these seeds were planted and we need to do the work. And then we have the opportunity to say either here's a bill or an ordinance, and we can put that forward, or if we feel here's a charter amendment that we can bring to the voters. So it sounds like it's a matter of a difference of opinion on what the order of operation should be. And I simply feel that the detail that the sausage should be presented on the ballot as opposed to, I don't know, the pig. We're going to keep going with that. So that's I think what's going on, because I do think that it's really important. I think you're right, Counselor, that we heard loud and clear from them that they did not feel that they had the time and resources to do the work. And I do think that it is our job to then take a good hard look at this process, and do our jobs as counselors to put it together before we put it to the ballot. So I'm not saying that you're saying that you don't want to do the work. It just sounds like you and I have a different opinion of when that should happen. And I think it's, before the ballot, and your preference would be I won't speak for you, but my preference is that the work happens before there is a ballot initiative or an ordinance proposed. So thank you. Councilman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In this case, I feel like it does give details enough for someone to understand that what work needs to be done and changed, and the actual the actual ballot question outlines all the particulars that need to happen in order for the Charter Review Commission to function. So it lists 7 different things that need to be adjusted. So I think that in itself actually has the details of how this will, what needs to happen. So procedurally, obviously, we will work out the details, but I think it's pretty clear in this case that what they're needing that was outlined in their recommendations is here. And I personally wouldn't compare this to the excise tax. The excise tax is a lot more complex. It has to do with the tax that affects the taxpayers. And so, yeah, all those details do need to be very clear and fleshed out, how we calculate them, how we calculate the tax, et cetera. I think that definitely needs to happen, and that happened in the ordinance. That's why it's an ordinance for the excise tax versus a resolution making recommendations to put a ballot question. So I see those as 2 different areas and level of detail that's needed. And the other thing I was thinking about for all of these ballot initiatives is there really isn't a way to give more detail to the public. The question wouldn't be framed longer with more details because most of the ballot questions are fairly short, or else you lose folks. So I think that if we put more details, like the procedures will need to be worked out later on, just like the change with full-time mayor that was suggested by the charter and was implemented, and then details were worked out. They actually put a number of, remember they put a range for the salary, and that was controversial. So that probably shouldn't have that detail shouldn't have been put in the ballot measure, because people didn't agree that was the number. So things like that. I guess I think it depends on the question and what we're proposing and what level of detail there should be. Thank you.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to use your last word, detail, our city charter doesn't go into great detail because it's a high level overview. So to put it in perspective, it's 20 pages long, with 2 of those pages being a title page and a signature page. So that's 18 pages. And to say that this information has to be included in the charter, that's not what the charter is intended for. The charter is a document with guiding principles, objectives, and values. And then it refers to ordinances, policies, procedures, et cetera. And so I think that is where there's the differencing of opinion, that we're proposing to add these values to this charter. Then we can reference the ordinances, policies, procedures, et cetera, later. I think the idea is, do folks agree with the idea of the value that we're proposing? And then we can get into, well, how do we make up this value based off the input of the public? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I would just always state that, for me, devil's in the details. And that's why, with the excise tax, there is an ordinance. I can answer the questions. And so I understand that, yes, I understand, Counselor, I can hear you over there. I understand that it's not adding to the charter, but what I will say is that if my constituents were to ask, what would be the impact of this? I can't answer that question. And so that's where I feel uncomfortable. I understand that you don't. Seems to be, it is a difference of opinion of the order and not necessarily the substance of the work that needs to be done. With that, can I please have a roll call?
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Cassett,
No,
motion passes.
thank you so much. Moving on to matters from staff. Do we have any matters today?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'd just like to mention that it's hot. And in response No, not at all. To the heat, our community services department has really stepped up. I'd like to thank Maria Sanchez Tucker, the director, and the staff there who are now offering in addition to the regular services, cooling lounges at the libraries during regular library hours for anybody that's suffering from the heat in their home or outdoors. We also have the recreation division at the Chavez Center providing free passes to go sit in the wonderfully cool ice skating rink bleachers during open skate times for free for anybody that doesn't have air conditioning or is suffering outside from the heat. And of course, we have our Mary Esther Gonzalez Center for seniors, where anybody 60 and over can go and watch TV in a nice cool space. So we have a lot of options for our folks out there, and we want to just also encourage everyone to watch out for each other and take care of each other. Our emergency management department is looking at getting some extra water supplies so that people can be passing out waters to our friends and neighbors out there and to stay safe. And that will enhance everybody's quality of life in this hot time. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ochoa. Director Brown, anything from you today?
Madam Chair, members of the council, no matters from the community development staff.
Thank you. Loretta, anything from you?
No matters, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any matters from members of the committee? And I have no matters. Our next meeting is Wednesday, August 16th, 2023 at 6:54 PM. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.